Welcome to the Self-Belief Podcast, the show that we shift your self-belief in, because self-belief shifting shifts everything. If you're unhappy with parts of your life and you know something needs to change, but whatever you try, you just keep ending up back in the same thoughts, reactions or choices, my free continued writing session is perfect for you. It's a live event on Thursday the 18th of June at 9:30 and I'd love you to be there with me. Continued writing helps you find out the automatic patterns that are happening subconsciously, because until you're aware of them, you just can't change them. Once you can see what's happening, you can begin to understand why it's there and what can change. If you don't know what continued writing is, it's where I give you an unfinished sentence and you write it down, and then your subconscious continues to write the rest. Not the answer that you think you should give, not the acceptable one, but the one that comes out when you give yourself some space to write without overthinking it, because that's where your answers are. You don't need to have done continued writing before. I'll ask the questions and you write down whatever comes into your head, even if it doesn't make any sense, because you're not trying to get the answer right. You're letting your subconscious give you the answer that you need to hear right now. So don't forget, live on Thursday the 18th of June at 9:30 a.m. and the link to join is down in the show notes. If you can't make it live, you can still use my continued writing in your own time, because I have continued writing prompts available on my website, www.jennyfield.co.uk. Once people begin recognising the thought that appears before they step into a situation, they often notice something else. They see how quickly they decide that the situation is theirs to deal with. Welcome back to the Self-Belief Podcast. I'm Jenny Field, your self-belief expert from Just Being Me. And today I want to talk to you about something that can be so hard to see at first, which is just how quickly you decide that something is yours to deal with. You see something happening and your mind moves straight towards solving it. Someone looks unsure and you begin thinking about what you could say to help. A problem appears and you immediately start working out how you could improve or solve it. At the time, this usually feels like being helpful or responsible. You see something that would be better and your instinct is to do something about it. Because the thought appears so quickly, it can feel like the obvious or reasonable response. What many people don't realize is that the decision to get involved has already been made before they are fully aware of it. The thought appears and the situation becomes something they believe they should be dealing with. And for a long time, that's exactly how it worked for me. If something wasn't working, my attention moved straight towards how I could fix it. If someone seemed to be struggling, I assumed I should help. And if something looked like it could be improved, I moved straight towards improving it. At the time, I wouldn't have questioned that behaviour at all. It simply felt like being responsible and doing what needed to be done. And if I'm honest, it felt really good to be needed. But once I started paying attention to where my energy was going, something else became clearer. Many of the situations I was responding to weren't actually mine to deal with. Someone else was capable of handling them. Someone else could have made the decision or solved the problem, but because I had already stepped in, that opportunity rarely appeared. Because when you are used to noticing problems and responding quickly, your involvement can happen before anyone else has had the chance to deal with the situation themselves. Your mind sees the gap and moves towards filling it. And from the outside, this looks positive because things get sorted and situations improve. Other people may appreciate the help because the situation becomes easy for them. But what you and they may not realize is that you have taken responsibility for something that was never yours. And what that meant is that they didn't get to learn how to take responsibility for it. And when this happens repeatedly, it begins to shape how people actually see you. You become the person who sorts things out. You become the person who deals with problems and keeps situations moving. Over time, that role can become very familiar and it can feel like a part of who you are. And there's a difference between being capable and taking things on that aren't yours. Being capable means that you deal with what is yours to deal with. Taking things on that aren't yours means that you step into situations that belong to someone else. People need the chance to learn how to deal with a situation that allows them to grow. When you step in, you remove that chance and the situation gets handled without them having to work it out. Over time, they come back to you again and again because they haven't had the opportunity to learn that they can deal with it themselves. I saw this very clearly when I worked in domestic abuse. There were situations where stepping in was necessary because safety had to come first. And in those moments, the priority was to deal with what was happening right then. But what I also began to notice was what was happening afterwards. We were dealing with the immediate situation, but we weren't always creating space for the person to understand how to support themselves or recognize what was leading up to it. The situation would be handled, but the pattern that led to it often stayed the same. That meant we were often stepping back into similar situations with the same person again. Not because they wanted that to happen, but because they'd not been given the chance to understand what they could do differently for themselves. And that experience showed me something really important. There are times when stepping in is necessary. But if that is all that happens, the situation may change in the moment, but the pattern underneath it stays the same. It also uses your energy in ways that often go unnoticed. You're thinking about the situation, working it out, staying involved in something that was never yours to deal with in the first place. When you allow the situation to stay with them, your energy stays with you. You're no longer pulled into something that doesn't belong to you. You may decide to walk alongside that person, but that's a different energy altogether. The difference is not always obvious at first because the situations themselves often seem small. A conversation where someone is unsure what to do, a situation where something is not working properly, a moment where someone else looks uncomfortable. Each of those moments on its own may not seem significant, but when your instinct is to respond to all of them, your attention is constantly moving towards situations that just don't belong to you. And that is often where the draining of your energy begins to make more sense. It's not only the work you are responsible for that uses your energy, it's also the time spent thinking about situations that other people could have handled themselves. So this is a moment where a new question begins to appear. If I don't get involved, who will deal with it? At first, that question can feel really, really uncomfortable because you genuinely care about the outcome. You may know that you can improve the situation or make it easier, but that question also reveals an assumption that the situation won't be handled unless you deal with it. And very often, that turns out not to be true. When you allow other people to deal with their own situations, something different becomes possible. They may solve the problem themselves or make a decision in their own way. They may struggle with it for a while before they can find their own answer, but that process, it belongs to them. When someone steps in too quickly, that process never really happens because the situation has already been taken over before the other person has a chance to deal with it themselves. And this is also where something else becomes clearer. When you step into a situation that doesn't belong to you, your role changes without you fully noticing it. Instead of allowing the other person to deal with it, you begin doing parts of it for them. You may take over decisions, offer solutions before they have thought things through or move the situation so it feels easier. At the time,
This can feel like support. You're helping, you're making things smoother. But what can often be happening is that the situation is no longer theirs to deal with because you've stepped in. And there is a difference between doing something for someone and supporting them to do it themselves. When you take over, you remove the need for them to respond. When you stay in the background and allow them to handle it, they get the chance to think, decide, and act in their own way. And for a long time, I really didn't see that difference. I believed that helping meant getting involved in improving the situation. What I didn't see was that my involvement often meant the other person didn't need to do anything differently. When you begin to step back, something else becomes possible. The situation stays with the person it belongs to, and they begin to respond to it themselves. They may take longer than you. They may do it differently from how you would have done it, and they may even get parts of it wrong before they work it out with your support. But that process is part of how people learn to deal with their own situations. It doesn't mean you stop caring about people or ignore situations completely. It simply means you begin recognizing which situations actually belong to you and which belong to someone else. That distinction can feel unfamiliar at first because your instinct is still to push yourself towards involvement. And even when you see the situation doesn't belong to you, the urge to step in can still appear. The thought may arrive telling you that you should have dealt with it or helped sort it out. That reaction often comes from the role you've been used to playing for such a long time. And if you've spent years being the person who noticed the problem and improves the situation, stepping back can feel really uncomfortable, let me tell you, because you're responding differently from the pattern you have followed for years. That discomfort doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing the wrong thing. It simply means your mind is adjusting to a different way of responding. The instinct to step in may still appear, but you're now able to recognize the thought rather than just automatically following it. Once people begin to see that moment clearly, something important starts to change. Their energy stops moving towards every situation that appears in front of them. Instead, it begins to stay with the things that generally belong to them. That shift doesn't happen instantly because the instinct to step in may have been there for years. Over time, though, that moment becomes easier to recognize. You see the thought appear, you pause, and you allow the situation to remain with the person it belongs to. Being a capable person doesn't mean that every situation requires your involvement. And knowing how to solve something doesn't automatically make it your responsibility. Because allowing other people to deal with their own situations is often the moment where your energy begins to return to you. For many people, this is where the bigger change begins. They start to see their energy had slowly been spreading across situations that had never actually belonged to them. Once that becomes clear, something shifts and their attention starts to return to the parts of their life that are genuinely theirs to deal with. That's often the moment people realize that boundaries are not only about saying no. They're also about recognizing what is and what is not your responsibility. When you begin seeing that clearly, the way you use your energy changes. Thank you for being here with me today, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If you'd like to know more, you can find all the links down below. Oh, and don't forget to press subscribe so you can catch the next one. See you soon.